This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Over 25 years helping leaders reducing errors and incidents. Here is your host of the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast, Rob Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast. I'm your host and intentional leader, Rob Fisher, coming to you from the ArrowHP.com studios in the Fit Center for Excellence here in Concord, North Carolina. In the last episode, we described the 5th attribute of the Essential Leadership Cycle, diversity and inclusion. I hope listeners immediately used some of the recommendations at the end of the podcast to start making changes in their intentional leadership. By now, you should have downloaded the eColors app and are using that information to manage your strengths and potential limiters in your day-to-day interactions. In this episode, I'm going to discuss the next attribute of the Essential Leadership Cycle, commitment. Commitment is a very personal thing. Many organizations and leaders don't understand or acknowledge the systemic attributes that help encourage commitment in the individuals in the organization. Commitment, much like trust, is a developed attribute. Good self and team awareness, established and verified shared vision and values, and clear roles and processes tend to establish individual trust in a way that leads people to commit in their own way. But they will only tend to commit to the limit that they trust you or the organization. And there are typically 2 different types of trust that feed that commitment: competency trust and relational trust. People who tend to be more independent, more task-oriented, tend to strive for competency trust. These are your doers and thinkers. They trust that you have the skills to do your job or task, and that you'll do what you say you're going to do, and you'll follow the processes and procedures. The people who tend to be more independent and more people-oriented tend to strive for relational trust. These are your relators and your socializers. They trust you enough to speak their minds and voice their opinions without fear of retribution. They trust that your goals and visions are aligned with theirs. Each of these different personalities will tend to commit based on the type of trust they tend to develop. Teams rarely achieve 100% consensus as team members have different viewpoints. However, 100% commitment is achievable if all of the team members have had an opportunity to voice their opinions and have been included. Where 100% consensus is not achievable, it's the responsibility of the leader to make the decision and then explain the rationale to the team members seeking their commitment to move forward in a way that they can trust. Teams tend to be more successful related to the commitment of the members when there's a trusted decision-making process in place that is followed, especially when there's a conflict of opinion. Including people in the process to get their diverse input tends to breed better individual commitment when using the decision-making process. So you may have noticed that as we progress through the Essential Leadership Cycle, each time we have a new element, it relies on the previous elements being established to make it more successful. That's why the cycle works so well, to focus leaders on what they need to do, how they need to do it, and why it needs to be done that way. For a long time in human and organizational performance, and there's still some of this today, the leaders didn't have any specific models or tools that they could commit to get the outcomes they wanted. HOP was treated as a field error reduction thing instead of a way of enabling the entire organization to manage the challenges that impact sustainable, reliable, and resilient performance. People will tend to commit to things that meet their personal needs, including their knowledge needs. Some personalities need to know the what. Some need to understand the how. Some are more who-oriented, and others need to know why before they can commit to something. Taking individuals' e-colors or personalities into account during the preparation and development phase of a team or project tends to drive both commitment and the discretionary effort that typically accompanies it. Meeting these needs tends to make individuals realize their inclusion. My wife and I love to travel. We especially like Maui and have been there many times. One of the things we've never done, and it was on my bucket list, is to do the bike ride down Haleakala, the volcano on the island. On one trip, I declared well in advance that this was the year we, note how I included her, were going to do the ride. I talked about how excited I was for us to do it. We get to the island, and I had noticed that she didn't seem as excited about the trip as I was, but especially related to this planned bike ride. You see, I was asking her to commit to something that I wanted to do and that I thought would be fun, but I hadn't included her in the process for planning the ride. I asked her about why she wasn't excited, and she told me that she was just apprehensive about it and didn't know why. So I proposed a change to the trip. I said, let's drive up the volcano first to the state park. Then we decide whether the bike ride is something we want to do together. I fully expected that we would do the car trip and see all the families riding down the mountain and then go back the next day with her more comfortable with the process and the fun bike ride. Was I ever wrong? Now, the road up Haleakala is a bunch of hairpin turns that wind up the mountainside. It's a beautiful ride. When we got to the first set of switchback turns, we saw a family riding down with the mom in front, the 3 kids behind her, and the dad taking up the back of the pack. The mom's hair was blowing back, and the look on her face was one of sheer terror. The kids looked concentrated but a bit scared on this narrow road, and the dad was smiling from ear to ear. Now remember, this was at the bottom of the ride. They were at the end of their bike ride. I pulled over at the next turnout. I looked at my wife and said, we are not doing that ride. I saw the wife and kids' face, and I don't even think the dad knew what they were going through. But I won't put you through that, and I don't want to do it either. I don't know in our over 40 years of being together if I've ever seen a feeling of relief sweep over my wife like that. She had been harboring a fear of the bike ride for months, but didn't want to spoil my excitement for doing it. We had a great day, and that was a great trip. On the way home, I asked her, now that the trip was over, how it was. And she said, best vacation ever. Now, I know we've been on some good ones, but I asked her what made it the best ever. And her answer? No surprises. In other words, by including her in the discussions about what we would do and when we would do it, she could actually commit to those things and to being able to have fun doing them. She didn't have to worry if I was going to ask her to do something that she didn't have the time to process, which is one of her personality needs. So what can you do? Take people's personality needs into account when you're trying to get them to commit to something. And if you don't know what someone's E-colors are, ensure you put the who, the what, the how, the why, and even the when into the conversation. Sometimes rather than telling them, have an engaged discussion about these attributes that will then lead to a stronger commitment to the team, project, or process. It's hard to expect commitment from your team if the other essentials are not present. For example, if there's a lack of self and team awareness, which I exhibited about the bike ride, if there's a lack of shared vision and values, which I exhibited in the bike ride, and there was a lack of clarity around roles and processes, which I exhibited in the bike ride, then a lack of trust and a lack of diversity and inclusion follows. It's hard to gain commitment from the team. Make sure that you as a leader focus on the driving elements to get the result of a commitment from your team and individuals. Until next time, this has been your host, Rob Fisher. Thanks for listening. And remember, intentional leadership starts with you.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.
This is no ordinary sub shop. This is Firehouse Subs.
Welcome to Firehouse.
Tired of overpriced lunches that underdeliver on flavor? Head to Firehouse Subs, where for a limited time you can get a $4.99 choice sub. Choose from a medium smoked turkey, Virginia honey ham, or roast beef. They're custom-made hot subs at a price ready-made to make you smile. Just $4.99, only at Firehouse Subs. Enjoy more subs, save more lives. Participating locations plus tax, limited time offer. Prices may vary for delivery.